Hello, my dear AIRC415, how are you doing? Just a quick message from me, Craig, before we begin this week's podcast. On Tuesday, the 10th of May, my online conversation course is starting, and there are still some places available if you want to join. The focus of this course is speaking, and we meet twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. on Zoom. That's 8 p.m. CET, Central European Time, and the course lasts for 6 weeks. So if you hear this message before the 10th of May and you would like more information, go to englishmasterclass.net. That's englishmasterclass.net for more information. I hope to see you there on the course. And in the meantime, please enjoy this week's podcast about scandals in the royal family.
What's your opinion of the British royal family? Whether or not you're a royalist, you may be surprised to hear some of the details we're about to tell you concerning scandals among the most famous family in Britain. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level.
If you're a new listener to the podcast, you're very, very welcome. And if you've come back to listen to us again, thank you very much. How are you doing, Reza?
Well, I've just eaten a very, very nice homemade biscuit. Thank you very much, Craig. And I've had a lovely cup of coffee. So I feel like a king.
Good. I'm pleased to hear it because we're talking about kings, queens, princes, princesses, and all types of people that are connected to the British royal family. And while you're improving your listening skills, we hope you find some of this information useful. But before we do that, we have a voice message from Sandra from Madrid.
Hi, Reza and Craig. This is Sandra from Madrid, Spain. I'm a huge fan of your podcast. It's something that makes my commute a lot more interesting and funny. I love your topics and how you get along. You put a smile on my face every morning. I'm a kind of a bookworm, and I've recently discovered that there's a big community of book lovers in YouTube. They call themselves booktubers. I find it a great resource, and I'd like to ask you about this. Do you have any favorite booktuber? Could you recommend us an interesting YouTube channel on books? By the way, I'm reading To Kill a Mockingbird nowadays. It's been a real challenge. Thanks a lot for your work and dedication. Take care.
Hello, Sandra. Thank you very much for sending in your message. It was lovely to hear from you. So you listen to us while you are commuting. Sandra said that during my commute, she listens to the podcast. If you work in a different place to where you live, maybe you work in the city centre, but you live in the suburbs, then you commute to work. I really like that expression. And I also liked the expression to put a smile on my face. That's a lovely expression. Your podcast puts a smile on my face, or when I see you, it puts a smile on my face. Any comments, Reza?
Yes, I really like those expressions as well, Sandra, and your pronunciation was fantastic. Just one little thing, it's a classic mistake which many foreigners make because it doesn't really make any sense. It's an exception. You said that listening to our podcast on your commute makes it funny. You don't mean that, you mean fun. Probably the comparative, more fun. So fun means entertaining. And the comparative, it isn't logical, but the comparative is more fun. Yeah. Whereas the word funny means humorous, and the comparative of that is funnier. So hopefully our podcast makes your commute more fun.
More enjoyable. And you speak about being a bookworm, Sandra. You're a bookworm. A bookworm is a person who really enjoys reading, who loves books. And I do enjoy reading, but I have not heard of booktubers. So thank you for opening my eyes and introducing that to me. I had a look on YouTube, and there are people who speak about books on YouTube. It's a small community within YouTube itself. If you search in YouTube for booktubers, you will find some of these channels where you can get up to speed, get up to date, and learn about books. And I can't recommend a booktuber specifically because I hadn't heard of them before, but I did find an interesting video of 10 booktubers you should watch. And I watched the video and it was quite good, so I'd recommend that to you, Sandra. And there's a link in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/415. Reza, have you heard of booktubers?
I hadn't heard of it. Thanks very much, Sandra, for letting me know. I'm going to check it out. I would just say one more thing, Sandra. We understood you when you said that nowadays you're reading To Kill a Mockingbird, but that use of nowadays doesn't sound quite right. When you talk about a specific book, you tend to say, at the moment I'm reading, whereas nowadays might be used for kind of a subject. For example, I might be reading several books about the history of Spain. So I could say, nowadays I'm reading about the history of Spain. Okay, maybe I could say that. But the book I'm reading at the moment, specific book. Nowadays doesn't sound right there, does it?
No, I agree. You might say, for example, nowadays many people go to YouTube to find solutions to their problems. So they search on YouTube how to improve your English. And nowadays that's a good place to find information.
By the way, a great book. I read that book at school and I remember it to this day. I really enjoyed To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, me too. So moving on to scandals in the British royal family. Let's talk about that. That's the main focus of today's podcast. Reza, are you a royalist? Do you like the royal family? What's your opinion?
Ooh, now there's a good question. One thing is, do I like them? Another thing is, do I support them?
Or the royal family as an institution?
No, I have to say I don't. I don't like the idea that because someone is born into a certain family and their father or mother or some other relation ruled, they should rule. I don't like that idea. There's bound to be problems. Now, I know there have been great kings and queens over the year. In fact, I would say that the current monarch, as we're recording this podcast in 2022.
It might not be the case in 2023, but at the moment,
because she's very old, Queen Elizabeth, she does a great job, a fantastic job. One of the best monarchs the United Kingdom has ever had.
And the longest serving.
Longest serving. I trust her. She's reliable. She seems sincere. She's a good leader. But, some of her ancestors were rubbish. They were not good at all. I'm sorry. I'm talking about her family. I hope she wouldn't take it personally if I said it, but some of them were not good leaders. She is. What do you think?
I agree with you, and I'm torn. If I use the expression to be torn, T-O-R-N, I'm torn between, which means I can't quite decide. On one hand, sentimentally, I agree with you. I grew up with the royal family. My parents really liked the royal family. They spoke about them with respect. But practically, I agree with you. Practically, I don't see that the royal family, just because they were born into a family, should become kings and queens. It doesn't make sense to me. So I'm torn between the two sides. I don't dislike them. I'm not really in favor of them. I'm somewhere in the middle.
So I do like many royals, but I'm not sure that the idea of royals being the heads of state is sustainable much longer, to be honest, would be my verdict.
I agree with you. So we're going to look at a few scandals that have happened, and we're not going to go as far back as Henry VIII, who tended to kill his wives and change the rules of religion and the church. We're not going back that far. We're going back to 1936. and King Edward VIII. Now, King Edward VIII was crowned king after George V, and the following year, in 1937, he abdicated. Now, that's an important word to know. To abdicate is when the king or the queen step down or refuse to continue to be king or queen. And the reason that he refused to continue being king and he abdicated was because he was in love with someone called Wallis Simpson. Now, Wallis Simpson was an American woman, and she had been divorced twice. Well, she'd been divorced, and then when she met King Edward VIII, she was already married, in the process of becoming divorced for a second time, and it was a huge scandal. The fact that he'd fallen in love with this woman and he wanted to be with her, someone who'd been divorced, someone that was from overseas, from another country, and both of them, Wallis Simpson and the king, were accused of being Nazi sympathizers, because this scandal happened just before the Second World War when Hitler was coming to power. So they were accused of supporting Hitler and being Nazi sympathizers. So when he abdicated and he was not king anymore, he was sent to the Bahamas to be governor. So they got rid of him from British royal life. Although not a bad thing to happen if you think about it. I wouldn't mind being sent to the Bahamas with lots of money, would you?
Yeah, imagine they say, okay, you don't really have to do much work now. You're going to the Bahamas, you have loads of money, spend your life there. Okay, well, where do I sign?
Exactly. Yeah, just live on the beach and drink cocktails. Not a bad life.
So, Craig, why did he have to abdicate? Why not marry her and be king?
He wasn't allowed to marry her because she was a divorced woman. So according to the Church of England, of which the king or the queen is the head of the church, you can't marry someone who has been divorced. It's against the law of God, according to religion. So that's the reason why he was not allowed to marry her, and he wanted to be with her, so he could not become king, and they forced him to renounce the crown or abdicate.
Although I think since then they've relaxed the rules, haven't they? But we're talking about quite a few decades ago. Another thing that people talked about was possible racism as well. Racism against Americans. Yes, against Americans. The British public were not keen on an American woman being married to the king, right?
Yep, absolutely. And also the Nazi thing as well, because he went over to meet Hitler and he gave Hitler the Nazi salute. Wallis Simpson was a very strong Nazi sympathizer, apparently. She used to invite Nazis over to the UK, and this was just before the Second World War, at a time where Nazi Germany was expanding. So he died in 1972, King Edward VIII, but who was king after him when he abdicated in 1937?
Well, it's thanks to Edward's abdication that we have our present queen, Queen Elizabeth II, because her father, Edward's younger brother, George VI, then became king because his older brother had abdicated. So the Queen's father, George VI, and Princess Margaret's father, who we'll be talking about later, by the way, George VI, he then took the position of monarch, of king.
And if you want some more information about the life of George VI, he was the king who stuttered, who had problems with his speech. Watch the excellent film, if you haven't seen it, The King's Speech, with Colin Firth and the wonderful Geoffrey Rush and Helena Bonham Carter, and the very, very wonderful Guy Pearce, who played the part or the role as Edward VIII. A very good film if you haven't already seen it.
So let's go to the next generation now. I said that George VI had two daughters. One of them, very famous, Queen Elizabeth II, to everyone around the world. The other one, very famous to British people, but perhaps not so famous if you're not British. We're talking about Princess Margaret, Queen Elizabeth II's sister. What can you tell us about Princess Margaret, Craig?
She fell in love with a married man called Captain Peter Townsend, who was at the time a Royal Air Force officer. So he was very high up in the Royal Air Force in the UK. And he was married, but he did divorce his wife because they wanted to be together, Peter Townsend and Princess Margaret. But the Church of England, again, did not allow them to get married. So again, it's this church, this religion getting in the middle of relationships between the royal family. And in the end, she was heartbroken. She was really sad. Obviously, she couldn't marry the love of her life. And kind of on the rebound, if you're on the rebound, that means you finish one relationship and then you just jump immediately into another relationship that's maybe not the best choice. She married a photographer called Anthony Armstrong Jones, but that was a disastrous marriage, very much in the press and all the newspapers, and eventually got divorced in 1978. In fact, she got divorced in 1978. She was the first royal to get divorced since Henry VIII back in the 1500s. And if you want to know more about her life, watch the incredibly good The Crown TV series. I learned a lot from The Crown, even though some of the facts are not 100% accurate, but you do get a lot of background and information about the British royal family in The Crown TV series, which I think is on Netflix. Is that right?
I think so. I think you can get it on Netflix. I didn't know much about Princess Margaret until my 20s or 30s. And I remember having really interesting conversations with my mum. My mum filled me in a lot. To fill in is to give details about Princess Margaret, because my mum was a real fan of Princess Margaret, despite the fact that Princess Margaret was pretty famous for being kind of alternative.
Yeah, she was very vivacious. She loved parties. She was she was a socialite. She loved mixing with people, entertaining. She was very good friends with President Kennedy from the US. And she helped to influence policy and helped to make the relationship between the UK and the US even stronger.
Yeah, a very intelligent woman, but some royals or some people close to the royal family always kind of looked down on or didn't like her vivacious character and the fact that she liked a good party and smoked and things like that. They didn't quite like it, and my mum always thought that was great, and she was a big fan of Princess Margaret.
Yeah, she was very much in the shadow of the Queen, so maybe that was a reason why she was so extreme, because she was constantly in the shadow of the Queen at the time, yeah.
Now, our next couple needs no introduction. Prince Charles and Lady Di. Not Lady D, by the way, some Spanish people say. Lady Di. Di for Diana. Well, who hasn't heard about that couple? Craig, what can you tell us about Prince Charles and Lady Di?
What can't I tell you about those two? Yeah. So when I was growing up in the UK, their story and the problems they had in their marriage was very, very much in the press, in the newspapers. Allegedly, which means apparently, it seems to be, but we're not saying this definitely happened because we don't want to be sued by the royal family and taken to court. But both of those people, Prince Charles and Lady Di, had affairs while they were married. If you have an affair, you have sex outside of your marriage with other people. So in the press, allegedly, Diana had sex outside her marriage with James Gilby in 1992, and this scandal was called Squidgygate. So we have Watergate from President Nixon in the US. We have Partygate from Boris Johnson having parties during the pandemic. Well, Squidgygate was named that way because they called each other Squidgy. I think James Gilby called Lady Di Squidgy on the phone, and they taped the telephone conversations. So Squidgygate.
James Gilby is perhaps the most famous alleged lover of Princess Diana, but there are other alleged lovers. James Hewitt is another one. And a very famous face in the world of sport, Will Carling, who I think was the captain of the England rugby team. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
And what about Charles? Well, not really much of a secret now, but it was back then that, of course, he was having an affair with Camilla Parker Bowles. I think we can maybe even drop the word allegedly there, because now they're happily together and they're publicly and officially a couple. But back when he was married to Diana, it seems that he was also seeing Camilla.
And there's a very famous interview conducted by the BBC in 1995. Diana was interviewed after she divorced Prince Charles, and she famously said in the interview, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." And to this day, I can't imagine why Prince Charles would not be in love with and want to be with Diana, such a sweet, caring person, so attractive, such a lovely person. I just don't understand why that happened, but anyway.
But that's love, isn't it? Who can say why a couple want to be together? Everybody, virtually everybody in the entire world thinks of Lady Di as an icon of beauty, style,
compassion.
Somebody caring, compassionate. Yet, it seems she didn't do it. She didn't cause any special feelings. She didn't do it for Prince Charles. That's life.
So don't marry her in the first place. Moving on to getting closer now. We're getting closer now to present day royals. Prince Andrew has been in the news fairly recently. We're recording this in 2022. And this is where things get really seedy. That adjective seedy, S-E-E-D-Y, means very dark and immoral and not very, very nice at all. So Prince Andrew is Queen Elizabeth II's 3rd child, and he is 9th in line to the British crown. So there are 8 people before him before he would possibly become king. So what happened with him, Reza? What can you tell us?
Well, Prince Andrew resigned from his job as prince because of seedy, not very nice, suspicious friendships. He was allegedly close friends with the convicted sex offender. So convicted, not just a rumor, he was sent to prison for it, Jeffrey Epstein.
You said allegedly, but he was proven to be, like, he invited him to spend weekends together at his different houses.
There's no doubt about that, and he does not deny it. But I'm putting the word allegedly before the word close friends, which he does deny.
Okay, to keep us out of court. Yeah.
Well, Andrew says that he wasn't close friends. He says, yes, he was an acquaintance of Jeffrey Epstein's. Yes, he was at his house, but close friends? No way. Okay. So that's why I put allegedly with close friends.
So allegedly close friends.
Yeah. They certainly did know each other. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But conveniently, with Jeffrey Epstein dead, Prince Andrew says, didn't know him that well. Not particularly close friends, is what he says now. So did Jeffrey Epstein just die? Was that a bit of bad luck? Well, he was found dead. So it's supposed that he killed himself in his prison cell.
Of course he didn't. You do believe that?
Personally, no. I don't believe he killed himself, but the official line is that he killed himself because there's no proof that anybody else was there. But no, I don't buy it. I don't personally.
Isn't it strange how so many of these sex offenders, rich people, get found dead in their prison cell?
If they're connected to wealthy, famous people, yeah. If they're not, nothing happens to them.
Yeah. Someone in prison was paid to kill him for sure.
We think.
Allegedly.
So what about Prince Andrew then, his acquaintance? Well, Prince Andrew was sued. Craig already mentioned that word, to sue, S-U-E. If you sue someone, you bring them to court because they said something that you say isn't true. Prince Andrew was sued for damages in 2021 by a woman called Virginia Giuffre. She alleges that he raped her and sexually abused her when she was 17. So there was going to be a court case. However, it never happened because they settled out of court. To settle out of court means that although you're due to have a court case, if the parties agree, the two parties, the two sides, then you cancel the court case, and usually money has to change hands. So if somebody runs the risk of having to pay a lot of money to someone after the court case, they often just prefer to pay the money in advance and avoid having to go to court and have the name dragged through the mud. So if your name is dragged through the mud is dirty ground, then all the horrible, seedy details come out. So it was an undisclosed amount. We don't know how much, but I think we can say it would have been a hell of a lot of money that Virginia Giuffre received from Prince Andrew to settle out of court.
So they agreed on a payment. How much do you think, have a guess, how much do you think she got from
I'd say
Andrew?
It couldn't be less than a couple of million, I would say. Because
I would go much higher than that.
he's got the money, so...
I would guess 20 million at least.
Could be something like that. And yet, it'd be hard to say no to 20 million, wouldn't it? No matter how horrible the accusations, hard to say no to 20 million.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that she wasn't raped or sexually assaulted. That could very well be the case. But that's quite a lot of money. It's probably the reason why she took it so far, I'm guessing. Lady Edwina Mountbatten is a name you may not have heard of. Who was she? Well, she was the wife of Lord Louis Mountbatten, who was Prince Philip's maternal uncle. Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, and he passed away recently, the Queen's husband. And Lord Louis Mountbatten was also the Viceroy of India. When India was part of the British Empire before its independence, then this guy, Lord Louis Mountbatten, was very, very high up. He was in charge of a lot of British interests inside India. And what happened to him? He met a violent death, didn't he?
He did. A very, very famous case in the unfortunate history of Ireland's problems. As a representative of the Crown, the IRA decided to blow him up while he was on holiday in Ireland. He often went to Ireland on holiday. And in 1979, while he was on a fishing trip on a boat, the boat exploded and the IRA later claimed responsibility. A case that didn't do them any good because there were several Irish people on board who had nothing to do with the royal family, including a teenage boy who was out learning to fish or something like that. So that was a case which really backfired on the IRA. That didn't go down well with anyone. I think they regretted that one. So, what about Lady Edwina Mountbatten, the wife of Louis? Well, she's not so famous, but one thing about her is still talked about today. It was widely rumoured, there's no confirmation, it was rumoured that while she was with her husband, accompanying him in 1947 as the Viceroy of India, to negotiate the British leaving India, to negotiate the withdrawal, it's rumoured that she started an affair with the guy on the other side, the Indian politician who would later become the first Prime Minister of independent India. I'm talking about Jawaharlal Nehru, famous Nehru, the first Prime Minister of independent India. Now, is it true? We don't know, but we do know that they certainly did meet several times over the years. And we don't know if they did have a physical relationship. We don't know if they slept together, if they had sex. We do not know. But even the Mountbatten's daughter, Pamela Mountbatten, she says that they definitely did love each other. There's no doubt about it. But did they take that love to a physical level? We do not know. But it is rumoured that they did.
So many scandals in the British royal family, even these days, looking at Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. They decided to step back from royal life and royal commitments back in 2020. So to step back from something is to stop doing it. To step back is to stop doing something. So they were very involved in royal life and royal commitments. And back in 2020, they decided to stop being a part of the royal family. And in 2021, Oprah Winfrey did an interview with both of them. And during that interview, Harry said that the royal family had cut him off financially. Now, to cut someone off means to stop giving them money. If you are dependent on income and that income is cut off, then it stops. So that stopped, and they had to become independent. They did not get any money from the civil list or from the royal family. Even so, nevertheless, they still had enough money from somewhere to buy a lovely house in California, which is not the cheapest part of the US. They could have gone to Alaska or Michigan or Idaho, but no, they went to California. And Meghan Markle has been accused of bullying some members of the royal family staff. Now, to bully someone is to push them around, to tell them what to do, to be not very nice and to intimidate people. And that's one thing that she has been accused of, that she allegedly did. And also on the other side of the coin, on the other hand, Meghan Markle has accused the royal family of racism about her son Archie. So Harry and Meghan had a son called Archie, and because Meghan's ancestors are from Africa, quite dark-skinned, allegedly the royal family were making not very nice remarks and racist remarks about their son before he was born. What else can we say about them, Reza?
Well, Prince Harry may have stepped back from the spotlight. In other words, he's not so active now, but he definitely was in the spotlight. That means you're in the news a lot. When back in 2005, he went to a fancy dress party. A fancy dress party is a party where you wear unusual clothes, that you might want to look like a monster, you might want to look like a doctor, you might want to look like Dracula, whatever.
Costumes, yeah.
But Prince Harry made a rather unfortunate choice, and he dressed as a Nazi in 2005. And I don't know if it's a good idea for anybody to dress as a Nazi, but if you're a royal, you know that the paparazzi are going to be onto you. And it's a bad idea. But he was young, he was naive, he did it, and he was photographed as a Nazi. He was also photographed a few years later in 2012 in Las Vegas playing billiards. You might think, so what? Playing billiards? That's okay. Yeah, with no clothes on. Naked. You don't want to be playing billiards naked if you're a royal, because someone's going to take a photo, aren't they? Of course they are, and they did.
You'd have to be careful not to pot the wrong ball, wouldn't you?
Yes, you would need to be careful with all your balls on the billiard table, I think, if you're naked. I personally would prefer to wear underwear for my own personal safety.
Yeah. Oh, Harry. So that's Meghan and Harry. What will they do next, and what scandals await the royal family, and how much longer will it last, I wonder?
Yes, let's hope Prince Harry doesn't balls anything else up.
Oh.
A balls up is a mess, to make a mess of something, to do something badly.
And now it's your turn to practice your English. Does your country have a royal family? And if so, have there been any scandals? We would love to hear about them, so why not send us a voice message and tell us? Especially if you're Spanish, because we suspect there may have been some scandals in the Spanish royal family. So if there have been, then please let us know and we'll include it in a future podcast. Reza, how can people contact us by voice?
You could leave a voice message. Just follow the link in the show notes and leave your message at speakpipe.com/Inglés podcast. Remember that there's a maximum of 90 seconds for a voice message.
Or you could send us an email with a comment or question, and that goes to me, Craig, at inglespodcast.com, or to Reza, Belfast Reza, that's Reza, at gmail.com.
If you'd like more material to improve your English, can I recommend that you check out the online store, which you'll find at store, that's S-T-O-R-E, store.mansioningles.net. And you'll find there a range of material to help you with your writing, reading, listening, and speaking.
And before we say goodbye for this week, we'd like to thank all of you who are helping us by supporting this podcast on Patreon. You can join our Patreon program for a minimum of $1.20 per month. That's including VAT, value-added tax. Of course, you could donate more if you would like to, and by doing that you get instant access to recent transcriptions. For more information, go to Patreon, patreon.com/Inglespodcast.
Now, if we had time, we would thank every single one of our Patreon sponsors, but I'm afraid we don't have time. So what we always do is thank our most recent sponsors, the people who've joined us this month for the Patreon scheme, and they are Christina and Jesus Antonio Royo Lopez. Thanks to you and all of our Patreon supporters.
Now, we are not frightened, we are not afraid of our lovely Patreon supporters, but next week we are going to speak about things that people are afraid or frightened of. So join us next week for the episode on phobias. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.